respect your time. Thank you all for coming out this evening to a very, very special program. It's an opportunity for us to welcome back two very close friends of the Sonja Stone Center, both of whom visited us when this building first opened almost 10 years ago. As we begin, I want to also express our appreciation to the African American, African, and Diaspora Studies program, and I actually already messed it up, and I'm in the department, program for co-sponsoring with us tonight and for helping us shape this program and for welcoming our special guests. Tonight, what we want to do is to give you an opportunity to interact with two individuals who happen to be among those who we consider to be the best in making films that reflect the experience of African people and African peoples in the United States. They also are individuals who spent their lives trying to promote and support the work of others who are doing similar work. One of the things that we try to do here at the Stone Center is to honor those folks by bringing them here and placing them in contact with the community, which in effect helps us to fulfill our mission. Tonight we're going to do that to the best of our ability. I want to tell you how the program is going to run, and then I will get into the introductions. Before I begin, I do want to say that another good colleague of ours, Larry Rennie Thomas, is in the audience, and he just brought us a copy of a new book that he has out. So, Larry, if you raise your hand, Larry is one of our jazz aficionados. You might remember that on the program on the Wilmington 10, he brought a lot of attention to the case of Wilmington 10 and bringing the surviving members from that case here to the Stone Center to talk about that whole historical episode. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to try to play clips from some of the work that our guests have done. We're going to play clips from 3 of Haile's films and 3 of Joel Zito Araujo. After that, we're going to bring them up and we'll have a brief conversation with them, and then we'll open it up for you so that you can interact with them as well. I want to begin by saying a little bit about actually who they are. To many of you, Haile Gerima is no mystery. Haile was born in Gondar, Ethiopia, March 4th, 1946. He is a screenwriter, a producer, a philosopher, and lives in Washington, D.C. And he's one of the few African filmmakers that have been able to establish and to maintain an international reputation in the United States as well as on the continent. He immigrated to the United States in 1968 and decided to enroll in acting classes. And fortunately for us, he gave that up and decided to get behind the camera and to become a filmmaker. He went to UCLA, and we were laughing at lunch today because he says that at the time that he came out of UCLA, he had to fight to get his films made. It was very difficult. That the kind of films he was making were not the kind of films that they felt should be made. And he says, and you look at it now, that when you look at UCLA's website, they talk about the the LA school, the LA Rebellion, and he's representative of that group of filmmakers: Julie Dash, Larry Clark, Jamal Fanaka, Ben Caldwell, and others who came out and helped to flip the script when it came to filmmaking on African subjects and African descendants. By the time he graduated in 1976, he had completed 4 films: Hourglass, Child of Resistance, Bush Mama, and Harvest 3,000 Years. He went on after that to make 1978's Wilmington 10, USA 10,000, After Winter, which is about Sterling Brown, and also in 1999, he came out with Adwa, and African Victory, one of the pieces that we will see a segment of tonight. He then came to us with Teza, I skipped over Sankofa. We're going to see a piece of Sankofa as well. But we're going to end with Taser, which I think it's very difficult to pick a favorite film of Haile's, but for me, this is one that I think represents one of the moments that he went as deep as he could into his own background and into his own history. Haile describes himself as a third world independent filmmaker. He has expressly said to us that he's not interested in making Hollywood films, and I think we're the better for it. Right now, if you go to Washington, D.C., some of you know that he has reinvested in the community and operates Sankofa Bookstore, which is also a film center, located in the heart of the African American community at 2714 Georgia Avenue Northwest. And for those of you, have any of you ever visited Sankofa by any chance? Well, if you ever go to Sankofa, you'll learn about African filmmakers because all of the sandwiches are named after African filmmakers. A wonderful touch. And I think it's his investment in sort of a cultural memory that won't leave you. Our next guest tonight is a visiting artist and visiting scholar, primarily for the Stone Center for February. Some of you may have remembered that he was the Stone Center's first visiting artist in 2004 when his film, Daughters of the Wind, was released. He is an acclaimed Brazilian filmmaker, director, writer, and producer of films and TV programs since 1984. He's produced 24 documentaries, 22 short, 3 full-length, and most notable of his efforts is the award-winning Denying Brazil, a piece of which we will see tonight. He is one of those persons who's been able to track the evolution of the African and Afro-Brazilian image in film, and he's been rewarded for that very richly. His film, Filhas do Vento, or Daughters of the Wind, won 8 top awards, including Best Film and Best Director at the 32nd Gramado Film Festival, which is Brazil's equivalent of the Academy Awards. It premiered at the Museum of Modern Art in New York in June 2004 before he brought it here to the Stone Center that next month for the Diaspora Festival of Black and Independent Film. His most recent release, Crasa, is the first feature documentary on racial equality to be released to a national audience in Brazil. The film follows 3 Afro-Brazilian protagonists whose lives demonstrate profound and historic changes the country is experiencing. Joel Zito Araujo has a Doctor of Philosophy in Communication Science from the Escola de Comunicações e Artes. And once again, it's sort of, I don't know how to say it, it's sort of embarrassing, but I took Portuguese and I am murdering these names. However, I will translate. Araujo has a Doctor of Philosophy in Communication Science from the School of Communication Arts at the University of Sao Paulo. He also completed postdoctoral work and was a visiting professor at the Department of Radio, TV, and Film and the Department of Anthropology at the Center for African and African American Studies at the University of Texas. He also is very much interested and concerned about the interaction between filmmakers from the United States and filmmakers in Brazil. And to that end, he is planning a film festival in November in Brazil that will feature films from African Americans, or as we like to call it, North America. We also are fortunate to have an industry insider as our moderator tonight and another close friend of the Stone Center, Natalie Bullock-Brown. Most of you are familiar because she's come with us on very many occasions to work on the Southern Black Film and Media Collective. She is a graduate of Howard University's film school. She has a Master of Fine Arts in Film, and her thesis documentary, Black Science, Steve Coleman and the World of M-Base, was also very interesting, but she also went on from there to work with Ken Burns on some of his documentaries. She also has presented at Duke University at the Center for Documentary Studies, and she also has done community film and video. Many of you know her as a host, as a matter of fact, on, what was the name of the program? What was it? Black Issues Forum. Yeah, Natalie was host of Black Issues Forum. Thank you all for humoring me. I'm not the only one that sometimes forgets. But that is the format. I'm going to ask Rissa to come. I also want to mention to you that Haile had brought his films for those folks who are interested in purchasing any of the films dating back to Bushmama. And he's been very generous and is going to give you a flat cost for any of the films at $15. Great bargain. Okay, so we're going to start. The first film that you're going to see is going to be a clip from Agua, An African Victory, one of the documentaries that Haile directed that focuses on the Ethiopian victory over Italian forces.
I want to start off by asking a general question for both you, Haile, and Joel. It seems to me that both of you use filmmaking as a political platform, as a place of advocacy and a kind of call to consciousness for your audiences. Is this what you're after? And if so, or if not, explain. Whoever wants to go first.
My master.
Somebody. So we'll start. I want to know, I think that both of you use filmmaking as a political platform, and that you use it as a way to call your audiences to a place of awareness and consciousness. Is this what you're going for? And explain that.
First of all, thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to be here once again. I'm proud to be in this space like that. And I reject you because you different to try to close them. I created to honor the Black heritage. In this sense, it's an honor to be here to participate in this event. I think the life pushed me to do what I do. When I began my career as filmmaker, I didn't begin with this subject. Only 5 years later, I did a documentary film. The name is Picture in Black and White. And I was surprised that this film provoked a lot of debate in Brazil because this film, the most important question was, why this myth of racial democracy is so powerful in our country, and many people outside the country, even the black people, believe in this myth. So my film was about this myth, and how I said, it was a surprise when the elementary school, universities, start to use of this film a lot in Brazil. And it provoked a lot of debate in the black community. And in this moment, I found out that before me, the most part of the filmmaker, with one exception, Bullock, but the most part of Brazilian filmmaker refused to talk about the racism in Brazil. So after that, my focus moved for this thing. So my story.
Well, first I just want to thank this guy Paul Joseph, because it amazes me how he still works at this place, where the microphone doesn't work, a rich white school, better than Howard University, yet our mic is better than this place. And so I'm just sitting here fascinated at his age. He moves chairs, he moves tables. And I know his king is older than me. It amazes me how much this reflects America. Ironically, we sit in the contradiction of what it is about, what is the African story in America. This is it. This is a good example. Good example. I can take you anywhere, you will see this contradiction. Microphones. At least in Dubai, Arabs are so rich they employ white Americans, Australians, and Australians, Americans, British to run the microphone, and the Arabs just sit and watch and get things done. I go to Dubai, Abu Dhabi, I see this, and I go back to Africa, our microphones don't work. So anyway, I just want to thank your assistant, the sister. My sister Clarissa. Okay, I would like you to come to work at Howard. Not that Howard is better, but I just think we can offer better than this one. Now, in terms of your question, first, and then I want to say, I have a very, very close affinity to Brazilians because they are in my ABCD of race studies. When I was at UCLA, I concentrated on Brazil because that's where professors at UCLA used to tell us neither black nor white democracy, because it hurts you that people are divided on racial lines. So you want to find a heaven where it works. So they used to tell us, it's in Brazil, no problem of race. Well, it's another story, but I have a strong affinity. Brazil is a university for me in terms of my own development. Even Sankofa, my research is more Catholic slavery, like Louisiana. Brazil was the best location for me. So I have a great affinity with my brother here, and to be with him in spite of the microphones. Very, very good. So I'm thankful for Joseph bringing me with you. And then my sister, she was at Howard, and I'm very happy with moderating this thing here. Now, in terms of politics, to me, if you just study Hollywood, motion picture. That's why everybody chews the same gum. Americans advertise the same T-shirt. America controls the mindset of the world politics and culture because we live in the American empire. I myself ended up in America because I am the subject of that empire. It so happened I had Peace Corps teachers to accelerate my acculturation. And so Hollywood is the #1 school for political cinema. There's not a single film that is not political. But when other people make the movie, it's dubbed into a leprechaunty of this thing called political film. To me, I learned political cinema from Hollywood. It's the most sophisticated political cinema. Russians didn't even know how to do it as good as Americans. Cubans came the closest in the 1960s to really use the political art of cinema. Latin Americans in Brazil, Seminova, Chile, Miguel Latin, Bolivia, they really advanced this whole idea of the capacity of cinema. In fact, it's the Latin Americans who called Hollywood cinema is the new hydrogen bomb. I was amazed. I was a student. This would never let go of the hydrogen bomb, where you don't have to kill people, but you subdue their nerve endings, their mindsets. And so political film, in my view, film from day one was political. They say it's entertainment, oh, this is a voodoo thing. Has nothing to do with the actual story.
I want to piggyback off what something Haile just said, Joel, and ask you about this idea of the subjugation of mindsets, which is a very interesting way to put it. You deal a lot with this idea of skin color and how Brazilians regard their identity in terms of skin color. I'm wondering, to what extent do you think that Brazilian cinema, and even maybe cinema of America and other countries, have impacted this, for lack of a better word, and forgive me if this is too strong of a word, but obsession with skin color, and I've heard you use the term the ideology of whitening. Talk about that.
I think North America and Brazil, when you talk about this subject, race and racism, you have many similarities. The countries that the most part of the people that suffered from the slavery were raped and come to here in Brazil. The most part from Brazil than here, about 6 million black people. But the big difference in Brazil, if you compare with US, is the miscegenation. In fact, Brazil is a country with a huge miscegenation. The most part of Brazilian people is mixed people. Now, 51% of the Brazilian people consider themselves as Afro-Brazilian. But actually, the number is more than 51. So, we are not a minority in Brazil. We are majority, but majority than 51. Our problem is, our big problem is that the most part of the Brazilian people, Afro-Brazilian people, has low self-esteem about their black community. A huge opposition from the whites, because in Brazil it's normal when the white people say, my father was Portuguese, my father was Spanish, my father was German. They say that very proud. But if I say my grandfather was from Angola, it's a shock. I do insist in this kind of thing. So, the African origin, the native people origin, became a kind of taboo for Brazilian people. So, all miscegenation is a kind of process to be wide. It's the ideal for the country. So, in this sense, the whitening ideology and the whitening aesthetic were part of our culture from the beginning. And it was reinforced by television, by cinema, by advertisement, because when my country started to produce image about themselves, they reinforced this ideal that the future of the country will be a white country, a European country. So, the church in Brazil, especially, the most part of the Brazilian people are Catholic. The church in Brazil, if you go, until today, if you go to church, the saints, guys, angel, a lot of them, are alien. Not white, more than white. They have blue eyes, blonde hair. So Chris was born in Africa, near the Africa, close to Africa. But the representation of Christ in Brazil and the angel, they represent as alien people. So, if you see television, if you go now and see the soap operas, the most important program on prime time, you only can find 10% of black as actors and as characters in the soap opera. And in most part of them are served as a stereotype of blacks. So, it's the big difference. The whitening ideology is so powerful for us and provoke this modern low self-esteem, this context. It destroyed our soul, the most part of Brazilian people. So now you are in a good moment, because the black movement in the last 40 years has been so active and you have many figures. The affirmative action started in Brazil in the last decade. So, I think the best example that you could reverse this situation is we see the census in Brazil, the national census. In the beginning of this 21st century, only 42% of the Brazilian people assume themselves as Afro-Brazilian. 10 years later, 51 assume it. I think it's interesting. It's the best example that you could reverse this pressure, this war machine against our mind.
And so, Rasa, is that correct?
Yes, Asa.
That film, which was the last clip that we saw, that addresses this issue.
Exactly. The Rasa tried to capture this moment, this new moment.
Where there's an increase in the number of Brazilians who are self-identifying.
Exactly. Finally, the debate about the racism in Brazil became a public debate. In my past, when I was in the university, only the Afro-Brazilian, the few Afro-Brazilian universities talk about racism in Brazil. Now we have a real national debate about it.
It sounds like the movement is responsible, but then you are forwarding that conversation through your work as a filmmaker.
I think I collaborate in some way, both.
Let me ask you, Haile, because as my professor, you were very outspoken in the classroom, and certainly your filmmaking reflects your understanding and also your processing and analysis of politics, not only in America, but certainly in Africa and Ethiopia. Would you talk about, just as Joel has discussed, this issue of skin color and racial identity in Brazil? How do racial politics inform your work?
Well, don't you guys, wasn't he describing the United States? Yes. Joel was doing that. He was actually describing America. To be called African at a certain time in America is the devil. It's the end of one person's life. The shock, the trauma to be called African. The black hair was condemned. The black nose was condemned. And so for me, he was describing America. Well, the dashiki really comes about in the early 70s, late 60s. So I think, in fact, very interestingly, in Brazil, it's amazing how Africa, even when we deny it in our own mindset, refuses to die. The kind of collaborations Africans do to kill Africa, by now you would think everything. I mean, Brazil is Africa. Whatever you say, even white people, when they go to Catholic church, they look like they're worshiping something from, came out of Congo, came out of some Nigeria, Orisha, etc. So even the Catholic church is Africanized. And at the same time, the people and their, elevation due to white supremacy is something that we all experience in different parts of the world. He was describing Jamaica, the whitening of like this, in the New York Times, Time magazine, he didn't deal with it. He was describing West Africa, black women bleached You can sit next in a plane, you'd see where it separates and the whitening begins. It's a disaster, but to me, I think it goes back to, see, for me, white supremacy is deadly because it's an inner cancer. It goes inside the system. In fact, we live in an era now, white people don't have to even do a work they did in the early part of our encounter with them. Now, the virus of white supremacy is so ingrained in our system, we do the most devastating damage to our African personality, our African spirit. So I think that, to me, in fact, what we're seeing in Brazil is they're going towards black power in the way African Americans went to black power. So it's really amazing comment. And the tragedy now is the continent. What is black power going to look like in Nigeria? I mean, what is black power? What is it going? What is the context of Africans in Congo? Where do we begin to? I mean, when he was talking about the God, the blue-eyed, blonde-haired God. Okay, I go to Ethiopia to do a film, and Ethiopians have painted their own gods from time immemorial. But at one place I went, the church had Tom Cruise, a poster from Tom Cruise film playing a vampire as God's image. So the topsy-turvy of what white supremacy does to us is not limited. It's in the Nile Valley where we all began. And so I'm just, I think cinema is the most devastating because cinema went into our psyche. Displaced that, in fact, this is what has happened to the political movement. Even the whole Black Power movement, the Black Panther movement, with all this black nationalism and dashiki, deep down, our mindset remained colonized because most black political leaders do not understand the cultural psychoanalysis we have to wage against our mindset. So even the films we made, the most political people, the elite of Africa, cannot read or spell in film or culture, in theater, in music, in poetry. So the revolutionaries in Mozambique, the revolutionaries in Angola, wherever they were completely caught unprepared as to the idea of the cultural struggle. They were armed struggle, they learned everything, shooting they thought would get rid of everything, but an ingrained, systemic inner turbulence remains to be the factor. I mean, how do you justify what's happening in Congo? In our name, what happens to children, to women? What kind of black people are we? What have we become? And when we want film to degauss that, to process, even the most elite Africans do not understand the role of culture. They think political independence does it, but political independence does not do it because if human beings don't change in the head, they don't know how to take advantage and be history makers of their own historical circumstances. So for me, we are facing our elite here, our elite in Brazil, our elite in Africa. They do not understand the struggle. They have joined the exploitation of black people using the white supremacist paradigm. And therefore, we don't have producers. I have to beg European whites to make a film. And I say, okay, make a film against how I colonized you, here's money. That's a very topsy-turvy situation that African filmmakers find themselves in. It's unheard of. You go to your people to get finance. You don't go to the very people that you wanted to degauss therapeutically to reposition your humanity. And so to me, I have experience. I came from Africa colonized. I know what it means to worship white people. I was one. All the way to Chicago. When I saw white Peace Corps, when they come down of the bus, we run to carry their bags. We race to carry their bags. They didn't even ask us to carry their bags. because we wanted to be closer to the power structure of the new Roman Empire, because we felt that civilizational, that is modern, etc. So for me, I'll tell you, we are betrayed by the black elite, but the black bourgeoisie. Black people now are the virus of white supremacy. They make the stupid movies and try to argue with us saying, oh, it's really what we can do now. That's not a human discussion. And so I'm going all over the place because when he was talking what I know in America happened. He was talking about America. Brazil is just inching towards the Black Power movement. The problem is, even after the Black Power movement, culturally bankrupt people coming to power is meaningless. Meaningless, because in the end, if we don't have the artists to be financed, if we don't have like the poets, okay, if we don't have, I mean, so long as Sony is doing my poetry, how far can I go into my inner spirit? You know? The clash of who produces it, who makes these cultural manifestos, whose story is being told, is even now. I don't want to bring it up, but here, America is in turmoil. Every time white folks have one movie out, black people lose their sense of intellectual gravity, throwing against as if they made it. And in a world like this, it is a disastrous situation. I just want to make a movie. I don't want to make a movie to blame nobody, but I want to exorcise the historical demon that has apprehended my capacity to be a history maker. But what is the crime about that? Why don't we have black producers who have the guts to finance movies? Why would it take me 20 years to do a movie?
And I want to jump in.
Jump on.
This as an aside, this is what you just heard and witnessed, that was class with Haile at Howard. And that would be it. Okay, so, you know, the last thing you said about it taking 20 years to make a film, I read that it took 14 years for you to make Tessa. And I also read where you referred to filmmaking, or at least the making of Tessa, as a type of war. And you were talking about the struggle to make the next phase of Tessa, which is the distribution. Why is filmmaking, and this is for both of you, why is filmmaking, or at least the type that you engage in, such a fight? I'm going to let Joel answer that. The question is, why is filmmaking like war? Why is it such a struggle for filmmakers who are trying to, as Haile said, to exercise, to deal with the issues that are at the heart of what, at the heart of the oppression that the people that you're trying to reach are dealing with?
I think in Brazil, the situation for us, black filmmaker, is worse than here. Because you have one side, you have a huge cinema market. I have the numbers here, but I can give you someone if like the exact numbers. But I will try answering if I remember. The Brazilian market means about 170 million tickets sales by year. But the most part of the tickets the people that likes go to movie theater goes to see American films, Hollywood films. Brazilian films participate in that in 25% of the audience. And the people, Brazil has have about 200 million people. But only about 20 million people goes to movie theater. And the people that goes to movie theater is white, young, between 10 and 30 years old, and have the mind colonized by the American, by Bollywood. And the films, the Brazilian film that reach the audience, that received more than 1 million tickets, are comedies inspired on soap opera in Brazil, with white people for white people. So, I think now we have about 400 filmmakers in Brazil. And that filmmaker that did feature films, not short film. I'm talking about feature film, the film that was presented on movie theaters. So, you have only 4 black filmmakers in Brazil. 404 black filmmakers in Brazil. The last year was released on movie theaters in Brazil about 170 films. Only one filmmaker released one film in the movie theaters. Hassa. These 4 filmmakers, Jefferson Day could shot one feature film. Zos Bubu, one feature film. Rogério Moura, one feature film. I'm the most local guy in Brazil. I could release 4 feature films. So, but the number of people that saw my films, it's not important. Hassa, I released in 20 big cities. The number of people that saw Hassa was 4,000 people. Dog of the Wind was a big success in Brazil. Only 40,000 people went to cinema, to movie theater to see my film. But about 1/3% of the films by white filmmakers that goes to movie theaters can reach 1,000 people on movie theaters, Brazilian films. 1,000. So, Haas is a success for independent filmmaker. Actually, the most part of the Brazilian that likes cinema and then go to movie theaters hate this kind of subject. Especially films about racism in Brazil. Racism in Brazil is still a taboo for us. So, of course, I have my audience, but my audience is on television. When I released my last film, Cinderella, in the first night, 1 million and 1.5 million people saw my film. And the channel in that moment reached the third position, the audience on the channel cable. So I have my audience, but not in the movie theaters. But what is the problem? The problem is the other contradiction. I don't know another country like Brazil that has, in this moment, about $200 million public funds to put in cinema and TV series. The name for that is Fundo Setorial, sectoral funds. Brazil has $250 million funded funds, public funds. But these funds is only for the big film from the television. It's just elite, connect with this elite. Because the logical of this fund is we put money for films that can reach a huge audience and return the money. We like to improve the film Brazil industry. They are not connected with the Brazilian culture, with the Brazilian question, the Brazilian problems, the things that we need to discuss to improve my country. The ideologies, the market, this kind of thing. So, for me it's strange, it's a big contradiction. The government has a lot of money from the tax, from all Brazilian people, and they put money only for the films that has the target just 20 million white people that goes to movie theater. So these funds can support films like Cinema Novo, like Glauber Rocha, because you know these films. It wasn't a big success for audiences, but then became very important to talk about the Brazilian culture, the Brazilian history, the political, the dictatorship, blah, 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 blah. So, and that's black filmmaker, that we have this kind of obsession to talk about our black identity, to talk about how to fight and destroy the Brazilian inequality. These guys that love the free markets, that love, so for them, us, Brazilian, black Brazilian filmmaker, are a kind of Tyrannosaurus Rex. We are in the past. We are in the 70s. The new world, the paradise is the markets. And we are insisting to talk about the myths of racial democracy, the whitening ideology, the whitening aesthetic. So it's not normal, it's a problem. We have a problem. We need psychologists, not to do films for them.
Well, for me, I want to say something.
Yes.
The precedent is African Americans in the 1930s and 1940s, when they were segregated, owned over 1,000 theaters. There were over 40 film, credible 40 film, at least, production companies that made films with black people. So it's not unheard of. Black people have had theaters, distributors, movies in America in the 1930s, 1940s. as part of anything independent integration, unexamined integration, desperate integration. The elite pushed both white and blacks, destroyed all the infrastructure black people built in America that I even saw when I first came to Chicago. And so the idea for me, even now, for example, a Zimbabwean kid in Zimbabwe says, well, I want to go to Hollywood and make film like Sankofa, like Haile. And this film, I mean, I don't have a penny from America for my movies. Oh, slavery, I made it from a European money in 2 African countries, Burkina Faso and Ghana. That shows you the capacity, how we can, if we had, in these places, we have to have an elite people placed with the right frame of mind. It's a window. Sankofa couldn't have happened. In Ghana, there was one person that understood where I was coming from. And the door closes when you miss that window, because it doesn't have a whole infrastructure elite that enables and greenlights movies. Burkina Faso, Sankara's children, even if he was dead at that time I was doing a movie, he had set in motion where I benefited, although from Compaore time it went back to zero. They came all the way to Ghana. They brought camera, lights, etc., and crew, the best crew. We put together Pan-African crew to do Sankofa. There's not a single American money in Sankofa. And I don't even go to white Americans after I tried them and realized they have a psychological barrier at the mere mention of slavery. I don't go to them. Because when you are in a psychotic situation, both black and white people in America are neurotics when it comes to slavery. You mention slavery, they lose their everything you know about them. And they no more, the discussion is no more normal. So I don't have, when I went to a European guy, I'm discussing, at least he didn't have this psychological trauma in him, in shame or in guilt form. And therefore he says, I would be in this film. And that was a green lighting that helped me, a German. So I'm saying in America, black people have to create the space. If there's an elite that claims to be driving cars, that claims to have a bank account, that claims to operate in trainways and buses and high heel shoes and makeup, if these people exist and they are real, then where is the cultural consciousness that sanctions not the filmmakers that would have to make film without compromising their trauma or whatever they are working? So the point here is, where are in Africa, there is not a system or a government after Sankara that could sanction. Even Burkina Faso films were made during Sankara's idea of taking from taxed European and French films, American films. You take some of the money, you put it for local filmmakers to share and make a movie. That's how Gaston Caboret's films were made. So for me, it takes me longer to make movies, because when I take my stories, I have to find somebody who connects to this grandmother, this intellectual dilemma he is in. You have to find a reciprocatory. But when you go to face a white producer and you have Nunu as the model, he says, she doesn't exist. And he is anything. And so they tell you, well, why don't you do another kind of film? Maybe we'll produce another film if you have. Because once you win a prize, you actually meet people who are interested. But what they want you is not to continue what you started. They want to abort you to their idea of using you in their plantation system to grind you to death. So for me, I think we have to harp on something. To me, Brazil is this, he knows more about Brazil. The Brazil black elite is as devastated as the black elite in Africa. When the elite does not understand to build infrastructure, history makers are not born. History making activity comes when you build a whole elite comes in motion. If you look briefly in Nkrumah, what happened? He had put an infrastructure for culture to come, and then a dead elite comes after he died. They even sold the Ghana Film Corporation to a Singapore company, and they're selling spice and stuff in it. So I'm saying the elite has to come to power that understand the cultural component of change and transformation, and we become equal partners of human planet, working in our situation. So for me, where is the black producer? Where's the black theater owner? In Sankofa, my wife and me proved all this voodoo theory about box office that whites have put in place as rules and regulations. We proved every mythology they built. We lined black people. We made the film in a basement. We were in Berlin International Film Festival. There's nothing we didn't prove that white folks say is the criteria. And yet we couldn't get distribution in equal terms, not as a subservient, okay, to own me like the way they own Jay-Z, but to have an equal partnership does not exist with another color. I have to be sanctioned by a white producer. A white producer has to say, he's safe, okay, I will mediate him for you. I keep him this way. To anything to work in music, in all cultures. Why are black people so discontented every day? Everybody's confused. Every movie comes out, we are still discontented and happy. Why? Because not our goddamn story. And why isn't it our story? Because we didn't finance it, we didn't make it, we didn't birth it. Some of us artificially get pregnant what movie to make. How else can one? A black man makes a film called More Money, or Barbershop 1, Barbershop 2, Barbershop 3, Barbershop 20, okay, Miss Dragging, Miss Daisy 1, 2, 3, 4, Miss Daisy 10, and Miss Daisy 10. How in the hell can this be forged except by the colonial arrangement? So I'm saying, you, me, what do you do in your basement? Do you have a theater in your basement? You can show his film in your basement. I don't need big theater. I have overcome that. Asa has won over 40 prizes I can't even count. But where's distribution? The theater owner in New York evicted us. In 2 weeks, he evicted us while we were doing high business. In Sankofa, we went and took a theater and said, from here stands black cinema. To say, this is the house. We took the whole theater, the popcorn, the ushers, because we had capital. And what happened? The black elite did not come and say,